Hi, Charlie here. At times, the world can seem like a pretty harsh place. Every day we see people living very hard lives. But what you don't normally see are the incredible acts of kindness that happen around the world every day. Well, today let's look at some of these amazing acts of kindness caught on camera. These acts of kindness were totally random and people weren't expecting anything in return. I won't blame you if you begin tearing up during this video. Nowadays, many school lessons are done on Zoom. Many people dislike this, especially teachers. That's because they don't know if their students are paying attention, and they also don't get a real connection with their students like they're used to. Professor Brown of Chapman University was very upset after one Zoom lesson. That's because none of his students had turned on their Zoom cameras. In the next lesson, he assumed that this was going to happen again. When the lesson began, none of his students had their cameras turned on, just like last time. But that's when they all turned their cameras on at once, and they were all holding signs thanking Professor Brown for making a difference in their lives.
It's just kind of the new cool thing to do, not turn your camera on. Seriously, is it my fault that you have your cameras off?
So, Dr. Brown, we actually kind of wanted to do something.
With your cameras off?
Everybody, if you want to go ahead.
Oh, you guys, no, you're gonna make me cry. I'm reading each one.
The professor was overwhelmed and broke down. It's clear that he made a big impact on his students. But in this final lesson of the semester, perhaps they made a bigger impact on him. There's nothing sadder than when a child gets sick. In 2021, this happened to Courtney Coco Johnson of California. She sadly was diagnosed with cancer and had to have chemotherapy. Normally, hospital patients can have many visitors, but because of the pandemic, this was not the case with Coco. She could only have one visitor per day. After 1 year in hospital, she could finally leave. But she got a big surprise when she returned home. Because she was unable to see many of her friends and family for a whole year, they set up a big welcome home party for Coco. Her reaction was caught on camera as she drove down her street and saw everyone waiting for her. She could not help but cry as she saw all of her friends and family for the first time in a year. Through her car's window, they all cheered, "Welcome home, Coco." This child is incredibly brave. So it's amazing that her friends and neighbors put on this surprise celebration just for her. In 2020, a third grade student named Daniel Hunt lost everything. That was when his family's home in Tennessee burnt down. All of his possessions and toys were lost. So that's why when he came into school a week later, he was given a big surprise. His teacher and fellow classmates had bought toys just for Daniel. This was to replace all of the toys he lost in the fire. They all gave him a big hug and he was overjoyed with his new toys. Robert Reed is an elementary school janitor. His job is hard enough, but what's just as hard is getting to his job. He cannot afford a car, and to get to work every day he would have to catch 3 buses and walk for 2 miles. So that's why in February of 2020 the school started a GoFundMe without Daniel knowing. In only 21 hours they raised $7,000, and this was enough to buy Daniel a new truck.
A GoFundMe for you, and we raised $7,000 for you. For you to buy a new truck.
When Daniel heard the news, he was so overwhelmed that he dropped to his knees and began crying. Later on, the GoFundMe campaign reached over $10,000. Now Daniel can drive to work like all of the other staff.
I love these people up here. Love them. I couldn't have made it without them. It's a joy to work here. Joy. Pure joy.
One day, a teacher in New York was leading an assembly. This was the monthly Student of the Month assembly. When she looked at the paper saying the Student of the Month, she was shocked. That's because it was the name of her own son. This made no sense to her because her son is a deployed US airman, and she hasn't seen him in many months. But when the teacher read out her son's name, he surprised her by coming through the door. She broke down in tears and gave her son a big hug. Before we move on, make sure you guys do your daily act of kindness by subscribing and pressing the notification bell. In 2021, a daughter was getting her head shaved. That's because she had cancer and was losing her hair to chemotherapy. Her mother was shaving her head for her, but that's when her mother did something that made her jaw drop. Her mother began shaving her own hair in solidarity with her daughter.
É muito branco. Tamanho branco. Que cor de cabelo preto? Mãe, por que você fez isso, mãe? Eu e Deus. Imagem de Deus.
This was so that her daughter did not have to do this alone. This gesture of support and solidarity brought tears to the girl's eyes. It's safe to say this is an incredibly touching moment.
Ah, mãe.
Something everyone takes for granted is the amazing colors we see every day in the world. Sometimes we forget that not everyone can do this. Around 1 in 10,000 people are colorblind. One of these people is a 12-year-old boy from Minnesota. He was never able to see colors and this made him rather sad. But when his principal learned of this, he knew that he had to do something. That's because his school's principal was also colorblind. One day the principal bought him some colorblind glasses. These glasses allow colorblind people to see normally. When the boy put them on, he was overjoyed.
That's awesome. Hey, come here. Come here, dude. Oh, I'm so happy for you.
He broke down crying because he'd never seen colors like this before. Most principals would not do something like this, but this principal clearly went above and beyond. He clearly cares about all of his students on a personal level. Recently, we have seen immense flooding in many parts of the world. This can be very scary to get caught up in, and that was the case for one driver who got stuck in a flood. His car was totally submerged and it could not leave the water. But that's when one heroic truck driver noticed this car in trouble. The truck driver veered off the road and into the flood, and was able to push the car to safety. Not only did this truck driver save this car, but he may have also saved the driver's life as well. Rush hour in China is very busy. This video starts pretty sad. None of the drivers are allowing this elderly woman to cross this busy 3-lane road. That's when one motorcyclist knows he has to act. He drives in front of all of the traffic, stopping them moving, and he makes sure that this elderly woman is able to cross the road. Your grandparents really care about you and do a lot for you when you're growing up. So that's why it's always amazing when you can repay that favor later in life. That's why one day a grandson surprised his grandfather with his dream car. He restored a 1957 Chevy Bel Air. This was to surprise his grandfather on his 81st birthday.
Oh, but
The car used to be very rusty and pretty much unusable. It did not have a functioning engine and the front was practically missing. But after the grandson restored this classic car, it now looks as good as new. It took a lot of time and money, but it was worth it. After all, his grandfather was so overjoyed he was practically lost for words. Amazingly, the grandson did the entire restoration all by hand. The car had been owned by the grandfather since 1965 when he was just 28 years old. If you have to spend time in hospital as a child, that's bad enough. But with the pandemic, they could not leave as frequently as normal, and they could also get almost no visitors. When a window cleaning company found this out, they decided to do something special. They made the children's day by dressing up as superheroes while cleaning the windows. The kids were able to interact with the various superheroes such as Spider-Man, Superman, and Batman. This was a really touching moment that brightened the children's day. Superheroes do a lot of good, but I think these window cleaners dressed as superheroes are more super than the actual heroes in the movies. As I previously mentioned, in China, the rush hour can get very serious. People don't stop for anything, even an elderly pedestrian. One day an elderly person was trying to cross at this busy intersection. No one was allowing them to stop, and that's when a cop stepped in. They blocked the entire road to make sure that they could cross safely. But now it's time to make your voice heard. Comment down below which was the most heartwarming act of kindness on this list. If you want some more amazing videos, then check out my second channel. But as always, thanks for watching. There are some more videos on screen right now. Leave a like if you enjoyed, and if you haven't already, what are you waiting for? Subscribe to Top 10s.